Hey, what's going on, guys? I'm Juan Pablo. I'm here to teach you some information about how you can properly screen your tenants for your rental property. I was a landlord. I started investing at 26 years old, and at 30 years old, I was able to quit my day job by investing in real estate. But my first rental property was a nightmare. I had tenants move in within 3 weeks of obtaining my first rental property, and my first tenant, I had to evict a young lady. And then I had another tenant move in. She didn't sign off on the check, and I had the check bounce. It was horrible. I faced a lot of nightmares with tenants who were crazy, tenants who didn't pay, tenants who destroyed my property. I've experienced so many hardships as a real estate investor. I was this close to saying no. But then I remember, you know what? I heard this before from my mentor. He mentioned this to me. He mentioned a no is just a yes in the waiting room. So I faced a lot of no's with certain tenants, right? To the point I ended up figuring out the yes, meaning the right strategy to invest and screen tenants. So I'm here today to share with you a few things, not the whole thing, but a few things of what you need to do to screen your tenants properly. First of all, tenants are bad before they move in, not after they move in, because it's based upon the person's character. And it's your job as the owner of the property or a property manager to screen your tenants effectively. You have to prevent bad tenants from moving in prior. If you can catch the bad tenants prior to moving, that will save you a ton of heartache and trouble in the long run. Now, if a bad tenant ends up moving in, destroying your property, doesn't pay rent, ends up being a nuisance, you cannot point the finger and blame the tenant. No one wants to be a listening ear to all your complaints. Don't be a crybaby and pout about it. At the end of the day, whose fault is it? It's your fault. You are a business owner. You're an entrepreneur. You're an investor. You have to hold yourself accountable for anything that goes wrong in your business. You cannot blame employees, contractors, customers, tenants, none. At the end of the day, it's all your fault. So being that you have control, then guess what? You have control to make sure you put the right tenant in your property. And secondly, if a bad tenant happens to move in, be the prudent investor, have reserves in place, have reserves for maintenance as well as vacancies, because potentially a tenant may destroy your property, damage your property, spitefully or unintentionally, and it may not pay the rent, right? But as long as you have reserves in place, that will soften the blow. So the first tip I want you to utilize when screening tenants is to check the tenant's current landlord. I want you to call the landlord and ask them several questions as to when did they move in, how were they in regard to paying their rent, did they pay their rent in full on time every month, how good of a tenant was the tenant in regard to, were they a disturbance, were they a nuisance of any means, how do they upkeep the property, and so forth. In our program, we have a ton of questions you should ask the landlord to make sure this tenant is a good tenant. Now make sure you actually speak to the landlord, because oftentimes the tenant will give you their auntie's phone number and have the auntie pose as if they're the landlord. But how do you check that? The owners who own the property is public information. But if it's a property management company, that information is public as well. So you want to make sure you do additional due diligence to verify the person you're speaking with is, in essence, either the owner, the landlord, or the property manager of that property. The second step I want you to utilize outside of the first step is I want you to screen the current employer. Now I love Section 8. A majority of my tenant base are Section 8 tenants. But I make sure that every last one of my tenants have a 9 to 5. They gotta be employed. Why? An idle mind is the devil's workshop. I wanna make sure they're working. Now, they're not working full-time, at least part-time. But I wanna make sure they're actually getting up every day and getting out the house. The longer they stay in your property, the more they're able to perhaps do something bad, which they shouldn't be doing. So you wanna make sure you have a responsible tenant in your property by verifying the tenant's current employer. Checking their pay stubs, calling HR, speaking to the boss, the supervisor, the owner, whoever it is that you can speak with to verify, is this tenant employed? Can this tenant afford to live here? If so, is their paycheck at least 3 to 4 times the amount of the monthly rent on a monthly basis? Also, Or do they show up on time? Are they consistent? How long have they been working here? To make sure they have a secure job. The next thing is you want to screen a tenant where their background is concerned. And what I mean by that is a criminal check. By a general rule of thumb, I don't want any tenant in my property that has sexual related crimes, drug related crimes, or violent related crimes. If they had misdemeanors, I can let that slide, but nothing dangerous. I don't want any dangerous tenants in my properties. No sob stories whatsoever. And you can check mysmartmove.com to get a background check on your tenants. Last point, check the tenant's credit report. So you might be thinking, well, Juan, you said they're on Section 8. So you require them to have a credit check as well as an employment check? Absolutely. With credit check, I don't receive any tenant in my property that has a 600 FICO score or lower. They gotta have a FICO score upwards of 600 to be a tenant for my property. And My Smart Move not only does a background check, a criminal check, but also a credit check as well. Now, if you're interested in managing your own properties, or if you're interested in managing the properties of others for additional revenue, then you definitely need to check out our program. We also teach a lot of information on how to be an effective landlord as well as property owner. And we also provide you with the resources you need, meaning the docs, the right jargon you need in your leases. You should always CYA, consult your attorney, right? Cover your assets, get a review. It's called attorney review. But we have a lot of points in our leases to make sure they're ironclad. We also have a property management spreadsheet to make sure you manage every unit, every property, door by door, tenant by tenant, to make sure you account for all revenue and expenses. We have a property inspection checklist. We have a variety of documents at your disposal so you can be effective as a landlord and property manager. So if you're interested in learning more so you can be effective at being a property manager and a landlord, check the links below. As always, guys, this is to your success. Continue to earn passively, live passionately. Peace.